It's Saturday, May 27th. I'm ready to get a long session in at 7 Mile Casino. The last couple have been rather boring, to say the least, so hopefully we get some exciting hands going. I'll check in after it's over.
8 hours later.
That was a nice, good long session. Let's see how it went down. I played a lot of big hands during those 8 hours, getting put in some interesting spots. I'm going to go over each hand as quickly as I can, skimming through some of the more standard but still meaningful pots, while spending some more time on the trickier situations that require more breakdown and discussion. Let's get it started. In this first hand, I raised to 15 with ace-9 of spades, and the hijack and the cutoff both call. The flop is very dry, king-high rainbow with 1 spade. Ace-high could easily be the best hand, but betting could get a lot of folds because of the texture of the board, and get my opponents to just fold out their equity. I decided on betting, not needing to size it too big with half the pot. The hijack folds and the cutoff calls. I plan on double barreling on spade turns when I pick up good equity, with also representing a strong king. I would expect to generate a good amount of folds. The turn brings the 10 of hearts though. I decided on a check, then villain checks back. I'm beating some straight draws like 5-6, 6-7, and 5-7, but I would expect a bet from those most of the time with no showdown value after I checked on the turn. It seems villain has a showdown value type of hand, like a weak king or a low pocket pair. River brings another 10. I don't think I can get villain off of a pair, and certainly not a king with a bet. I check, villain checks back again, showing 5-3 offsuit for the winner. I would think this opponent would have folded to a turn bet, but hard to know what a player would do if he calls pre-flop with 5-3 offsuit. I made a note on this player, but he left soon afterwards. Hopefully the other players at the table are giving this much action. I add another 100 after losing one non-significant pot and some blinds, and see Queen 10 suited in middle position. 2 players limp ahead of me, including a very short stack to my direct right that has been limping pretty much every single hand. He just won the bad beat jackpot a few days ago, so he seems ready to gamble and get it in there with just about any 2 cards. I decided on limping behind, wanting to play a multi-way deeper SPR pot with his hand. Raising would have been fine as well, but as played, limping is contagious as we go to a 7-way flop. Now I wish I had raised, flopping the absolute joint, nut straight with no flush draw. I bet 12 when the action checks over to me. 3 callers, and the pot is growing. Ace of diamonds hits the turn, and I bet 50 once limps checks. Both players behind me fold, and it's back to limps, who calls with $5 left. River's a 7, and he tosses in his last red chip, turning over 10-9 offsuit for a straight. No good. I take down a decent sized pot. Limping 10-9 offsuit from early position is quite loose. This player has also limped even worse hands than that, and also calling with horrible draws on the flop. Looking like a great table, plus with me being on limps every hand's left, I'm in the best seat in the house. This is the very next hand, where I make a standard open with pocket 10s in early position, and get 1 caller behind, and also the big blind, who is playing a very short stack. Great flop for pocket 10s, overpair with an up and down straight draw. The big blind then leads out all in for 60, bigger than a pot-sized bet. I call rather than raise. This is the type of hand I much rather keep the villain behind me in with many weaker holdings he might call, but fold to a raise. Hands like ace 10 where he's drawing for a chop, or a weaker pair plus straight draw like 8-6 or 7-6 that are in really bad shape against my holding. The villain behind me folds though. I hit my straight right away on the turn, The short stack shows 8-7 off for 2 pair. We were actually almost exactly a coin flip on the flop. Always good to win those. I'm card hot. Another big pot 2 hands later here. 4 limpers ahead of me in the small blind with 4-5 of diamonds. I complete with a good hand in this spot, going 6 ways to a flop, which comes huge for me. Up and down straight flush draw. I check, looking to check raise if one of the bigger stacks bet, but the shortest stack bets 10, and the next shortest calls. The next 2 players folding. I don't think a raise here would get too many folds, so I decide on just a call, looking to hit my hand before I put the rest of the chips in, possibly saving some money on a smaller than all-in turn bet, or even a check back. The flush does come in on the turn, so we don't need to worry about it. I could bet, but betting into both players looks exactly like I made a flush on this turn. I check, not sure if that was the better play or not. The next player checks, and the last one bets 40. Easy raise to get it all in. The better calls, not looking very enthusiastic. River's a blank, but then villain turns over Jack 8 of diamonds for a higher flush. He must have been worried about the nut flush, I guess. I had 2 outs for the straight flush. Didn't come, though. I lose basically the same amount of money I just won in the previous hand with pocket 10s. Easy come, easy go. Very standard hand here with pocket jacks. Not worth much time going over. I raise, a young loose player calls behind, and a very short stack goes all in for 62. I could flat to invite the loose player in, but I'd rather just keep his dead money in the pot and have him fold than give him a good price to play in position on me when we're both decently deep stacked. So I make it 100 more to go. He folds. The run out is not the greatest for pocket jacks. The short stack shows ace king for top 2 pair. Now I'm 1 for 2 on the coin flips. Next hand. Another premium in pocket kings finds me. I raise to 16 after limps every hand, reliably limps, and then get a young loose player to call with position on me, as well as when it gets back to limps. Flop is rainbow with all low cards. I put out a 3/5 pot continuation bet. The young loose villain calls, and limps folds. Not the greatest card, and the 5 of diamonds comes on the turn. Villain could have easily improved to the best hand with 8-7, 6-5, or 5-4, or at least picked up more outs with hands like 9-8, 9-7, 7-6. He still has other 9s though, like ace-9, king-9, hands like those, that I'm ahead of. With him only having a stack and a half times the pot left, I feel that betting's the best play to target those weaker holdings. If we were deeper, it might be a little ambitious to want to get all the chips in, and a check for more pot control would be the better play, especially since this board is better for the villain's range than mine. But with his given chip size, I wouldn't mind getting raised all in with my hand. I decide $75. Then after he calls, another bad card comes on the river. With that 8, any 7 now beats me, and the only hands that I'm ahead of are 9s with kickers 10 through ace. I'm not sure if those hands would call a shove all in, so at the table I decided on checking. Being honest, I had no idea what I was going to do if he shoved all in, but luckily he checks back, ucks, and I'm good. What do you think's the best line to take there on the river? Check fold, check call, or shove? I don't think check call's the best option because of a point I've heard Bart Hansen make a few times. Players at this limit don't turn top pair into a bluff, so if he had something like ace-9, he would likely check back with showdown value. So to me, it's between shoving and getting value from 9s, or check folding and saving money against a straight or 2 pair. To me, this is all player dependent, but against this loose villain, I actually think shoving would have been better. He has shown that he will loosely call mediocre hands pre-flop, flop, turn, and I don't see him folding it once he gets here on the river. Other tighter players check folding would be better, but for this specific opponent, I could have missed out on some thin value. He, of course, could have folded with just a 9 there. We will never know. Moving on. I pick up King 9 suited in the small blind, see an under-the-gun limp, and a really small isolation raise to 10 from that same young, loose, aggressive player. I saw this player earlier raise just 10 in middle position with 7-4 suited, and other times raise larger, not seeing what hand he showed down when he raised larger though. Everyone folds to limps on the button, he calls, and the action's on me. I don't think I can even make up a better squeeze spot. A loose player, raising with a bet sizing tell, gets called from a player that has been playing 80% of flops, with me also having an ideal hand to raise, being suited, and having a king blocker. So I make the squeeze play to 50, get the result I was expecting with everyone folding. I usually read smaller raises pre-flop in general as weak, which actually gets me into a pretty tricky situation a little later in the session. There's a button straddle on during this hand by an active player with headphones on, so I raise to 25 from pretty early position with ace-king, and get 2 callers behind me, including active headphones, as well as the small blind. 4 ways to a king 5-5 flop with 2 diamonds. I put out a half-size pot bet of 50, not too big since the board isn't very coordinated. The straddler is the only one that calls. Blank 9 comes on the turn. I continue betting. No reason not to keep value betting into a player that gives a lot of action and likes to call, but in this circumstance he ends up folding. Nothing much to talk about, but a good sized pot. Alright, these next 4 hands are all big, interesting, and exciting, I promise. This hand was a few orbits later with me on the button with ace-4 suited. There's a limp from active headphones, then a small isolation raise to 7 from the hijack. This is the hand that I preluded to earlier. I attack the small raise size and make it 30 to go, with a good semi-bluffing hand while also being in position. The original raiser then makes the call. I gotta play some post-flop this time. Big time flop. I check once the villain checks. Easy decision with very thin showdown value. The turn changes things up quite a bit, giving me top and bottom pair. So now I'm ahead of hands like King Queen, Ace Jack, and Ace 10 that seem to have been very likely played this way. I then get somewhat caught off guard with a larger than pot sized bet from the villain of 75. Pretty strange bet, I would say, since I can easily have the strongest hands on this board, and he really can't. Ace-king, pocket queens, kings, and aces, I would expect him to re-raise me pre-flop, but I could easily have those hands. So one of the best hands he can have here, and the main one I'm worried about, is ace-queen. He could have played Jack-10 suited this way, but that doesn't have as many combos, and might also limp behind pre-flop, since a lot of players at this limit with those type of hands like to see multi-way flops with lower suited Broadway hands. I think he would for sure do this play with King-Queen suited though, that's a little higher. That would have 2 pair. And then King-Queen offsuit might fold pre-flop. I think he might do this play with a few combo draws like King-Jack, King-10, Queen-Jack, or Queen-10 of clubs. Ace-Queen offsuit might raise larger than $7 to a limper, plus adding in all possible combos of King-Queen offsuit that many players overplay at this limit would turn this into a value hand I want to get all the chips in with. I also have a habit of overestimating the hands I put villains on at this limit. I see a lot of times players showing up with weaker holdings than I think. So in this situation, it might be Ace-Jack or Ace-10 that think they're good since I check back the flop. If he ever plays those hands like this, I would absolutely be crushing his range. The pot would be $220 if I call, with a $170 bet left on the river. I don't want to give villain the opportunity to check fold if he had a combo draw, so I decided on putting him all in. Villain doesn't like it, thinking I have ace king, but he calls, shows us the bad news in ace queen after the river brings no help. I could have easily overplayed my hand in this spot, representing a stronger value hand than I actually had, which is usually not a good play. Reading that small raising size preflop as weakness really cost me during this hand. Giving him that first tight range of hands, ace queen, king queen suited, pair plus flush draws, and flop straights with jack 10 suited, I'm actually pretty far behind, but giving villain just all combos of king queen offsuit for 2 pair, not even ever ace jack or ace 10, I turned into a favorite, all player dependent on whether a villain would call a 3-bet out of position with that hand and play it the same way as ace queen. We will never know if he does that with king queen. If he is the type of player that calls preflop with it, then my shove was a good play, and if he folds it, then my shove was a horrible play. I add on another 100 after getting a little under a full stack, making me in for 500 in total. 3 limps ahead of me, 2 of which are limping most hands, in the cutoff with the king-queen offsuit. Make it 20 to go, and all 3 limpers call. Good flop comes with queen, jack 5, 2 clubs, and I don't have a club. I bet 3/4 pot once the action checks to me. The 2 deeper stacks call, and limps gets out of the way. A great turn comes in an offsuit 3, and both players check to me again. I feel I almost always have the best hand here. Ace queen I wouldn't expect to limp call preflop. Then queen jack or pocket 5s I would think would raise the flop, especially the second caller since there's a bet and a call. The first villain, active headphones, has been playing kind of crazy, so this looks like to me a good spot for a value bet against flush and straight draws. It's just a question of what size. My sack is awkward since the shove is larger than the pot, but anything less than a pot-sized bet left leaves me with not much behind. I decide on a bet of 150, thinking a shove looks too strong and players with draws will fold that I could otherwise get value from. I want to make it appear like draws are getting the price and implied odds to call this bet, especially from the active action player. Thinking back, I think closer to 200 would have been a better sizing, but active headphones then actually looks confused with my bet and mutters, and puts in the call. The next player then takes a few good minutes on his decision before letting it go. River brings an offsuit ace, not a club, but still a very bad card. The ace-high flush draw now beats me, as well as king 10 of clubs, or king 10 in general if he's that crazy. Villain then checks, which is good news. I don't think I can bet. Can't think of a single worse hand that he would call me with. He could easily be check shrug calling the ace-high flush draw, I thought, rivering top pair. So I check, and hear the great sounding phrase, I missed, you got it. No clue what he had. My guess is something like 10-9, 9-8, 7-6, or 6-4 of clubs for a combo draw. The other villain that tank folded on the turn then lets the table know he folded the ace-high flush draw that would have taken down the pot. Very lucky for me that he was the player that folded. $560 decision. The same orbit I get pocket 8s from early position. So big hands kind of happen within spurts. Early on, there was a big spurt. Middle, nothing much going on. And then here at the end, I pick up a lot of big hands. I see limps, limp in under the gun. I raise it up to 16, getting a super short stack to call on the button. The player that crushed me with ace queen to call, as well as limps. Flop is decent. 10, 7, 6, 2 spades. I have second pair and a gut shot. Action checks to me. I decide on checking for some pot control. I don't want to get check raised and play a huge pot quite yet. I also think the super short stack can possibly bet for me. then I can get to see the action from the other two players that are out of position that will help me determine the strength of their hands. The button checks back, and turn brings Gin, a red 9, having a very disguised straight for me since I was the preflop raiser from early position and shouldn't have many 8s in my range. Ace Queen then leads very strong for almost a pot-sized bet. I make it 100 more once limps folds. Then I get a quick call once the action's back to Ace Queen. River is a red ace, so I'm only losing to Jack 8. Not very likely at all, I would say. Ace Queen then checks it over to me. I make a big bet of $300, thinking if Villain has a set, he will call pretty much any bet, thinking it is very hard for me to have an 8. Then 2 pair could possibly make a hero call. A draw of some type like Queen Jack of Spades would just fold to any bet. After I put my bet in, he immediately folds. Seems obvious to me that he was drawing since a made hand would at least think about it. Lucky turn for me. I get about half my money back from that Ace Queen villain, and I'm now up about $400 after those 2 big hands. The night was coming to a close for me at this point, playing about 8 hours. Limps to my right already left, and active headphones left soon afterwards. Seemed about time to go. This last big hand I played was with pocket aces in the big blind with the button straddle on. Everyone folds to me. I raise to 30 and get a call. Pretty good dry flop, 10-6-2 rainbow. I bet 1/2 pot of 30 and I get a call. Turn is the 8 of diamonds. Still an easy value bet with many worse hands that can call me. I bet 70. Then Villain shoves all in for 189 more. Easy call. I snap. See a bad river and another 10 hit the board. Hear Villain say, I just got really lucky, and see him flip over Jack 10 of hearts. Poker's brutal. Chips it all in. Top pair weak kicker. Almost never gets called by worse. 5 outs with 1 card to come. Spikes it. Gets rewarded with a $600 pot. That would have made a huge session for me, winning over 700, but I actually cash out for 612, only a win of 112. Still a win, but pretty disappointing. But if you can't take the bad beats, pick up checkers.